What is going on, shrimp keeper? So it has been 4 weeks since we got in our import. And so anyway, this is the point where we actually go through to assess how the livestock did, whether it's ready to actually go back into stock. And this is mainly referring to shrimp. So the ones that we're going to focus on in today's video is Caridina, which right now we're standing in our pond room, which this is all Caridina shrimp. And then we're going to go over to our Caridina rack. And so we're going to address whether things are healthy, ready to go back in stock. And I'll show you examples of things that are ready, things that are going to be held for another 30 days, and then also things that will probably be held for like another week or two just to make sure they're good. But I'll explain to you how we get to that conclusion. So in front of me, I have a binder, and this is where we record all of our information. So from the point that we get them in, how many we put in the tank, the date that they got here, how many losses we had each day, what medications we did, if we had to dose anything, if there's any notes, like if the tank was cloudy. And so we use this information, and then we also physically inspect the shrimp, and that's how we determine if they're ready to be sold or not. So I'll give you guys as much information as I can. If you have any questions, drop them down below, and I'll be more than happy to answer. So let's start off with cherry shrimp. So we ordered in a decent amount of cherry shrimp, and it looks like we stocked this one at 1,200. Now, going over this, what I see is like the first day we got it in was July 1st. We didn't really have any losses day one. Day two, we had 46 losses, which 1,200 shrimp, 46 losses. It's like a little under 5%, so not great. But then it dropped off 7.2, and then since we had the 7 deaths and the 2 deaths on 7.4. We've only had 2 deaths since then. So like this pond is actually doing really, really good. So how we know that this is an import tank also is because it has a blue label on it. So blue means import, green means good to go, and red means not good to go. So looking in here, it's actually pretty cool. There's actually Daphne in here. There's actually a ton of Daphne in here, which is super interesting. So I mean, I don't know why there's Daphne in here, but there is. And so this tank actually looks really good. A couple things about this tank: we have alder cones in there. The alder cones kind of keep the pH a little bit lower. So we've been battling pH issues. Our pH coming out of the tap is 8.9. And so that's super high. For these type of shrimp, Caridina, we don't want a pH really above 8, like 8.2 at the absolute most. And so it's been a nightmare. So we use alder cones to kind of bring that down, and then the alder cones really don't affect the cage, and cage determines the stability of pH. And we'll go over some examples where like our pH actually crashed and what causes that and how we prevent that. But this tank looks like it's doing pretty good. We pre-treat these for parasites. We pre-treat them for like bacterial infections and things like that. And then once we actually go to ship these, we do a double check. So we'll actually take them over to our camera. We have a macro lens. We'll look at the underneath of them, make sure they don't have any parasites or diseases, and then we medicate them one more time just in case there's something that we missed that slipped through our quarantine process. Then it will make sure to kill that before it gets to you. So that's just a couple things that we do. So this is a pond that would go green, but let me go through, see if there's any ponds that I think would go red or stay red, and potentially we go through quarantine for another 30 days or maybe even less than that. And I'll give you all those situations if we have them to show today. Now I'm gonna look at the complete opposite side of the spectrum. So these are fantasy blues. These are a blue Caridina. People call them blue dreams. Just so you guys know, a blue dream is more of like a carbon really mixed with a blue velvet, and I feel like the color is not as stable. Fantasy blue, the way that we refer to it, is bred from chocolate shrimp. So that's where you get like, every once in a while you get like a Bloody Mary out of them or a brown one. And that's because it's like all that chocolate line. But this color is much more stable. So that's the difference. Just real quick side note about fantasy blue versus blue dream. But that's basically what this is. So we have 2 ponds here. One got imported at the same exact time. We actually split the bags 50-50. Pond 1 did phenomenal. Pond 2 did really bad. And so we stocked each one of these with 600. It might have been 700 or something like that. Like I know there was an extra bag that we did something with. But like the last pond literally had like 2 deaths since the first 4 days. This one we have a full page and then a second page. And so we got these guys in, nothing day one. Day 2 we had 18, then 8, then 0. But then we started having some issues, and so we were having some ammonia issues. And going back to the pH issue that we're dealing with, and I know I said issue like 20 times because there's just a lot of things that go into this. pH, if the pH is 8, that means the ammonia is extremely lethal. So the higher the pH, the more toxic ammonia it gets. So if you have a pH of 7 or less, ammonia is almost not toxic or only toxic in really high levels. So just something to know. So when we're dealing with an 8.9 pH, like ammonia, like something goes wrong, it goes wrong really, really fast. So this one we treated with antibacterial stuff. We kind of got it under control as of July 10th. And then on July 19th, we actually had a pH crash. And so we actually test all of our tanks for KH, which is carbonate hardness. Our water has a KH of 5. And so we try to maintain that KH because live bacteria, nitrifying bacteria, shrimp, like everything consumes the KH out of the water. Like it's a building block that they need. Now, when it crashes, usually it's because we're treating with antibacterial medicine and somehow that consumes the KH really quickly, rapidly. If we don't clean the filters good enough, it can happen. So just something to be aware of. But anyway, our KH crashed, which caused our pH to crash. So our pH shot down to 4.8, and then we had 54 deaths, 8 deaths, 4 deaths, 2 deaths, 2 deaths. So like it's stabilized since then. But this is an example where when that happened on 7/19, we're going to hold these guys for another 30 days because the amount of stress that caused and the amount of like molting that happened when that crash happened, we want to make sure that these guys are going to survive the next molt. So this is a good example of we're going to hold them much longer than the 30 days. So like August 19th, we'll reevaluate how they're looking, if they had any other issues. And even if you look at these tanks, like you can look at tank 1 and notice a massive difference between it and tank 2. Like tank 2 looks cloudy, like it just doesn't look like a healthy tank. And so we like to hold these guys for a little bit longer, but this doesn't happen very often. It does happen, and that's why like having that 30-day holding period or quarantine process makes a ton of sense for shrimp. So highly recommend it, and this is a good example of why we do it. I'm not wishing summer away, but I'm just gonna say my favorite holiday is coming up pretty quick, and that's Halloween. And why it's my favorite? Because like, who doesn't like a freaking candy bar? Who doesn't like giving out candy to kids and seeing them go sugar crazy for their parents? Now granted, I got 2 kids now, so they ain't getting no candy because I know what happens to at least my oldest. She gets a little crazy. But anyway, we're talking about orange pumpkin shrimp. One of my favorite shrimp. Now granted, I love shrimp, so they're all kind of my favorite. But these guys are super colorful, and this is an example of a tank that we're gonna hold for an extra week, and I'll tell you why. So we got these guys in. Again, first 4 days is like the time that, hey, you're gonna have deaths. It's normal. We're treating them for bacterial infections, we're treating them for parasites, all that kind of stuff. So we had 32, 22, and 15 deaths, and then it really started dropping off. I mean, there's still like a lot of numbers going on, but this is one where like huge shout out to Curtis. He's one of our team members that take care of the shrimp, and he was able to catch that this was having a pH crash before it completely crashed. So on the 24th, July 24th, which wasn't that long ago, he did a test and he realized that, oh, like, you know, we had a couple deaths and that's not normal. It's been doing good. So like, why? So he tested the KH, and it turns out that the KH was 1. So then he tested the pH. pH was 4.8, super low. So then we're able to dose, shameless plug here, we're able to dose some Shrimply KH plus to get the KH back up in this tank. So our goal is always have it around like 5's ideal, but like 3 to 4 is acceptable. So he was able to bring that back up. So since him catching that and being able to rebound it, we only lost 10 shrimp total, and that's in the last 4 or 5 days. So that's really good news. So this is an example of us catching in time, but then we still want to observe them for a week just to make sure that like it doesn't crash again, make sure we're not having like consistent death because of the stress that it caused. So this is one that we'll evaluate a week from today and kind of see like how that's looking. whether they are stable and all that kind of stuff. So we have first example, which is the cherry shrimp, which are done phenomenal. Second example, which is the fantasy blues, which did really bad. And then this is an example of one of the ones that's kind of in the middle, where like we can evaluate it and be like, yes, like we are going to hold it a little bit longer, even though it's doing good, just to be extra safe. And in this room, we have, I want to say around 60 ponds. So it's much easier for a company our size to be like, yes, we're going to hold these a little bit longer because we have another whole pond of these. And then we have another pond of these. And like a mono shrimp, we have 12 ponds. So like we have a huge stock. So it makes it a little bit easier. Whereas like somebody like just starting off, it's much harder for them to be able to quarantine things for 30 days. And then if it's not good, hold it for another 30 days because like literally all their money's wrapped up into one tank. And that's where you run into some issues with people that are just importers. Anyway, I won't go too far down the rabbit hole, but this gives you an idea of what goes into the Caridina side. So let's go check out the Caridina side because that's a little bit more exciting, a lot more fun. Some more variation, some breeding might happen in the first 30 days, which is cool for us. So let's go check that out. This is something that's really cool. This isn't technically Caridina shrimp, it's crayfish. But the fun thing about these guys, these are the blue mini crayfish. We imported them the same time we imported all of our shrimp. These come out of New Indo and they are breeding. So we got tiny little babies in here. And we'll overlay some B-roll and you guys get to see them. But that's one of the fun things of the 30-day quarantine is like you really never know what's going to happen. And then this one is also a really good example. These are our blue bolts. And so we can order in 3 different types. We can order in like regular grade, we can order in medium grade, and then we can order in high grade. So we always order all 3 grades because we sell 3 grades on our website. We call them blue bull regular, blue bull mostly blue, and blue bull deep blue. And so looking in this tank, this is what we ordered as like the middle grade, so medium blue. But these guys exceed my expectations. So a medium blue bull or mostly blue bull has like a solid blue head, blue tail, but the tip of their tail or like the end of their tail is white. I'm looking at this tank and these ones are pretty much all solid blue. So like that's a good treat. It doesn't always work out that way. Sometimes you order mostly blue and you get like really bad quality. And that's normally not the case because me and my importer have a really great relationship out of Taiwan and he always takes really good care of me. But it is always nice when he goes above and beyond and sends me stuff like this. And so there's more examples of this. We'll go through as we're checking on the import and whether they can go back in stock and share some of the cool stuff with you guys. But the good thing about Caridina, whereas like in Neos, we had tanks that like had 50 deaths, 30 deaths, and then, you know, crash looks like 150. Like that's not good. Over here, we might get in like 200 medium blue bolts and we might lose 1. We might lose 2. So like the numbers are much lower. Like rarely do we have issues over here. So we'll go through and I'll show you like the highs and the lows. And I'll give you guys just a completely unbiased opinion of how our import looked and how it went. Hopefully there's some more exciting stuff for you guys. A high would be that we got in these red fancy tigers. And if you guys watched last week's video with me and Maisie adding some shrimp and some fish to her tank, this was one of the things that we touched on because we usually get in red fancy tigers and the quality really just varies because like they're a mixed shrimp. So like, you know, you might get really good ones, you might not, it just depends. And they don't like the high grade of these ones are like hundreds of dollars a piece. So like we're not spending that. We're just getting like the standard grade and that's what we're ordering in. And so what I like to see on these guys is I like seeing a 50-50 ratio, like 50% red, 50% white, and like good separation. So like it isn't like the front half's red and the back half's white. I like seeing like the actual tiger stripes. And I look in here and most of these fit that qualification. So like these guys are super nice and this tank is 2. And between these 2 tanks, 200, we had 1 death, which is just crazy. So like that just shows you how good this stuff goes. Eventually I really want to get back to breeding these guys because that's fun for me. But these guys really do look good. I would say I prefer, if I had to pick, there's a couple in here that are like 80% red and 20% white, and I really like the look of that. I don't like the look of ones that are 80% white and 20% red. So that's just my personal opinion. So what we do with these guys is we go through and we actually sort them, and we'll actually pick out like our standard grade, our medium grade, and our high grade. So that's what we do before we actually sell them. So I'll have to do that today, sort these guys and get them all sorted out for you guys. And then we got a nice guide right here for our team of how we sort them. And that's just one of the processes that we do. But these guys look phenomenal. These guys sell really quick on the website, so they're not for sale yet. You should see them if you're watching this video on Sunday or after. You should see them sometime after that. So maybe they're in stock now when you're watching this video, but I can't promise it. So let's go see if there's other cool stuff that I can show you guys. So unfortunately, I do want to show you the opposite side of the spectrum. So this doesn't happen often, but it's been happening the last 2 imports that we brought in. So orange-eyed blue tigers and royal blue tigers, we bring them in from Taiwan. They breed them in soft water, but when we bring them in, we keep them the same as they keep them, but our survival rate is like 0. And so these guys just slowly died over the 30-day quarantine. We tried a lot of different stuff. We can't keep them in. So the next thing that we're going to try is not to keep them on soft water. We're actually going to put them in Caridina parameters with like inert substrate, and keep them at a pH like 7.6, and then hopefully that'll do better. But this is another reason why we like to hold them for 30 days, because if we're getting information that this is how they're kept and we're keeping them that way and they're dying for us, I know for a fact that they would die for you guys. So even though we rarely have issues with Caridina, it's still not good to just bring them in and resell them. It is good to hold them just to make sure nothing's wrong. So we did lose a whole tank of orange-eyed blue tigers, which is super unfortunate, but that's why we do what we do. So definitely the opposite side of it, but let's go check out some more cool stuff and hopefully we can find something. So last but certainly not least, this is so cool. So we're talking about the red fancy tigers, how I personally like ones that have more red or 50-50 mix. But crystals, it's really interesting. A high grade crystal, there's 2 ways to grade them, and you should grade them both the ways. One, how good is their color? How good is their white color? How good is their red color? You don't want to have like splotchy white, like translucent parts of their body. You want a nice solid color, and same thing with the red. And then you could even go a little bit farther, is like, are their legs a solid white color? Are they a solid red color? Are they clear? Like, the more intense the color, the better the shrimp is going to grade. So that's one way to look at it. The other way is based on pattern, and that's where this is super exciting. So again, we order in a mix of grades, and normally like to get like high grade pattern shrimp, we might, out of, this is 200 shrimp, we might get like 4 or 5. But in this batch, there's like 40 or 50 in here, which really is super unique. So I'm really pumped about that. And we don't actually sort these ones. We don't sell them by grade. We just sell them as like a mix. So if you guys are shopping for crystal reds, there's a high probability that if you ordered from us, that you could get a really high grade. And there's like really, really nice ones in here that have like the smallest amount of red in the top of their head. And so even talking about the quality of the shrimp and different grades, this is something that's really fun. So next weekend, August 3rd and 4th, I believe are the dates, we're actually going to Aquatics. And why I bring that up is because the American Shrimp Contest is happening there. And so when you're breeding stuff at home, if you're breeding like really high grade crystals or red fancy tigers or whatever it is, this is an opportunity for you to show off what you've been breeding. And now, I know not all of you can make it to Dallas, not all of you can make it to Chicago or Daytona. The cool thing about the American Shrimp Contest is you just ship your shrimp there and they take care of the rest. So like, that's where it's fun. And even if you don't think that, oh, my shrimp aren't good enough, or I can't compete. I've had so many people that have entered the contest that thought that they weren't worthy, and then they ended up crushing it and winning. So like, you just never know. You don't know the quality of your shrimp versus other people's shrimp. You don't know who's competing. So like, I encourage everyone to do it because it's fun. And at the end of the day, that's what grows the hobby that we all love. And that's the goal of why we do what we do. So that's why I'm involved with the American Shrimp Contest, and that's why I promote it so much, because I truly believe in what we're doing and how we're doing it to grow the hobby and spread the passion that I found. But with Aquatics also coming up, I think it'd be cool, our marketing team, so DJM, Broccolini, and Lead Dog have all been working really hard to make a booth that is going to just be awesome and represent our brand good. And so we got a whole display upstairs. I'll actually take you up there and show you what they've been working on. They did some really cool stuff, but that wraps up kind of the import section. But you definitely want to see this because they put in some good work. So let's go check that out. So Pier 1 went out of business. And my wife and mom were like, oh, we should go shopping and see what they have. And I'm like, whatever, like, I'll go with you. And so I got dragged along, and they had all these cool displays, and everything was for sale. And I'm like, oh, I could probably use that. I'm like, hey, how much is that? And they're like, oh, it's this much. Then they had these cool shelves. And I was, how much are those? Anyway, I was like, hey, like, how are you guys going to keep track of all this stuff? Like, how are you going to do inventory in this? And they're like, oh, we actually don't know. And I was like, well, if you just want to make a deal on everything, I'd be interested. And then they came back and they're like, hey, for $500, you can have everything.
That actually is a killer.
Yeah. And maybe it was 1,000, but anyway, it was still like a phenomenal deal. And they're like, you can have everything, and then we're just done. I'm like, done. I will definitely do that. And so this was a part of that deal. And these were like a brown color, weren't they? Like they were crusty brown, and we just wanted them to look more modern. And so the team slaved in the hot sun.
I'm sweating. I have dirt all over my pants.
Until it rained, then they slaved inside, spray painting all this and making it look good. So they did a great job. So they got like their little setup going on over here. There's spray paint everywhere. Poor Em just redid her nails and then spray painted her nails. Probably got some on her nice ring. Yes, it might look a little messy out here, but don't focus on this. What we're focused on is this. This is what the teams work so hard on. So we got all of our kind of displays set up. The only thing that's not set up is like our pegboard on the back. That's going to be black. And that's where we're going to hang our plants and things like that. It's going to look really sharp. We're bringing plants. We're bringing shrimp. We're bringing snails. We're bringing hard goods. And we're bringing the entire team. So it's going to be a great time. You guys don't want to miss it. Aquashella, Chicago, August 3rd through the 4th. I'll put a link down below so that you guys can buy a ticket if you want. That's what we got going on. I hope to see you guys there. As always, God bless. Shout out to my marketing team. We'll catch you on the flip side.